Welcome to Medieval Instrument Talk. I'm your host, Christopher Werdeman, and this week we will be discussing the shawm. Now, many of you might be asking, now what is the shawm? No, it's not something used in the restroom. The shawm was a medieval instrument that became one of the biggest instruments, especially in band playing and other fancy affairs like that. So let's get down to the brass tacks of a shawm. What is it made out of? As you can see, the shawm was a wooden instrument that had a canonical bore at the end. Because of how it was made, it was turned on a lathe to get a nice smooth body, but then it would round out at the end. But up at the top, you can see there are a few different parts. So as you get to the top of the shawm, there's this nice big brass tack that's inserted into the wood that makes it a bit rounder of a shape. And inside that brass tack is where we then put that little tiny part on top called the pirouette. The pirouette is then going to be the holder for the reed. So yes, the shawm is a double reeded instrument, which is actually the first ancestor of the oboe, of today's modern oboe, which we'll discuss later. So who exactly played the shawm? Historians have noted that while it could have been played out of leisure, the more public appearances were usually played by professional musicians. It was not uncommon for civic governments to have shawm musicians on their payroll. These shawm musicians usually formed a shawm band, which is a sort of a consort. A consort is when you have multiple instruments of the same family playing together. Now, a family, say, of shawm, what does that mean? Well, just as today's saxophone instrument, which has the alto sax, the tenor sax, the soprano sax, and so on, that was the same case for the shawm. There were shawms of different varying lengths that could play higher and some could play lower, so that way it just produced a fuller sound. But as you can see in the picture that I have right here, there was something that wasn't a shawm in the shawm band. That was a slide trumpet that was usually performed alongside the shawm to give it just a different kind of timbre within the sound. So now let's take a look at how it was played. So as I stated beforehand, it was a double reeded instrument. The reed was nearly entirely in the player's mouth, and the lips of the player were touching the pirouette, which is the top part of the shawm. The top three holes were occupied by the left hand, while the bottom four were occupied by the right hand. But as the shawm continued to expand in length for those other members of the shawm family, people developed a key system that is seen today in your woodwind instruments such as the saxophone and clarinet to reach those bottom holes that the human finger cannot touch. When looking at how the sound was produced, it was produced through air. A lot of airstream was required to get sound out of the shawm. That amount of airstream nearly made it impossible to play softly. Thus, the shawm was known as one of the loudest instruments of the medieval and the Renaissance periods. So you might be asking yourself, if I were to travel back to the Renaissance time, or even to the medieval period, when would I have seen the shawm? Well, the shawm was seen in your public events, such as dances or other things that were held in the courtyard. Because of its loud nature, it was the perfect outside instrument. It was said to liven up any social gathering of stature that took place in the courtyard or the public square. And this success in the outdoor field continued up until the Baroque time, until it was then eclipsed by the Baroque oboe. So once it gets to the Baroque period, we see the shawm kind of dissipate in popularity because it was no longer of use to the musicians of the time. We will now hear what the shawm sounds like by my very own shawm that I made myself. Well, I believe that's all the time we have, dear friends. See you next week when we discuss the hurdy-gurdy.